message. So welcome everyone. Let me tell you a little bit about Tim. I had the pleasure, it's great to have colleagues across the US that are in the line of work of helping our manufacturers and our industries succeed. And I reached out to one of our colleagues on the national level and said, who do you know that's in a community or a state that has already legalized marijuana that might be willing to share some lessons learned and some tips to help us? And first name given to me was Tim. And Tim and I had a brief call, Darren and Tim and I, and definitely the right one to be sharing with you all. So let me tell you a little bit about Tim. He's the president of the Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Association, which is the leading he's leading the Colorado manufacturers' efforts to come together to make connections, build strategic relationships, develop their businesses, and collectively grow the manufacturing industry across the state. And little plug, Tim, if you ever get tired of Colorado, Virginia is always a great place. So you're welcome to come to this side of the country. He brings more than 20 years of manufacturing experience to CAMA. Do you call it CAMA? Is that how you say it, CAMA? Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ranging from proof of concept to institutional capital investment, turnaround, and product development. He began his career in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, and he served as a sub-center director for the Small Business Administration's Small Business Development Center and the manager of the Small Business Group for the Denver Chamber of Commerce. And he's received the Federal Laboratory to Industry Technology Transfer Award from the Colorado Technology Transfer Society. So we are so glad that you're giving us an hour of your time, Tim, to be with us today. And you and I talked a little bit in prep for this. Our legislation was passed, and the phase-in of different components of our legislation goes into effect July 1. There's lots of regulatory boards and oversight groups that are being set up, but we were briefed on all of that last week. And today is more about helping our community and certainly our industries get ready and to be as prepared as possible. So without further ado, you've got a couple slides that will set the stage. And then just for those of you that are on the phone, this is meant to be an open dialogue. Tim is prepared for that, and it's pretty much an open book. I mean, I learned that from our 30-minute prep call. So we're going to tee it up, and he's going to share some lessons learned, and then you guys will have a chance to ask questions. So we'll be monitoring the chat. So Tim, let's get right into it.
Great. And so, again, my internet connection today is unstable. You broke up several times in that introduction. So I don't know what you said about me, but thank you. I will tell you the one thing I did hear you say was come to Virginia. And I will tell you, I did live in Virginia for a while. It's a beautiful state. I love traveling through Virginia, especially in the spring, this time of the year, and the fall. Not so much in the, well, except the beaches, not so much in the summertime. So I'll wait till the fall unless I can get out to the beach. But I do love your state, beautiful state. But with that, I was born and raised in Colorado, a state that earned the name Rocky Mountain High, not because of marijuana. John Denver actually used that phrase in his song, Rocky Mountain High. John Denver was a resident of Aspen, Colorado, very active. Actually, one of my neighbors played in his band. Very active in promoting Colorado for a lot of different reasons, most of which was protecting the environment, and he did a lot of good for that. But yes, he coined the phrase Rocky Mountain High, so it had nothing to do with legalization. If you were watching basketball last night, you saw the Denver Nuggets win, you probably saw in their uniforms, the Mile High City. Again, a nickname that has been around long before we legalized marijuana. If you come to Colorado and were to walk up the west steps of the state capitol, just before you reach the top door, you're going to see a little marker, a bronze emblem embedded into the concrete on the steps that says you're now a mile high. That is the 5,280-foot mark in the city of Denver. Or if you ever come to Coors Field, you're going to see a purple ring around the stadium, and that too is that row of bleachers is exactly mile high. So We're the Mile High City, not because of marijuana, our altitude. With that, and the quote marks you see behind Rocky Mountain High on our slide really is because of what happened on November 6, 2012. By a 55-45 split, the voters of Colorado legalized recreational marijuana. So the marijuana industry loves to call Colorado a first mover state. There's some connotations that go with that I'm not going to try to unpack. I would refer to us as the early adopter. And so that's important that you understand, because I've actually lost track. I think we're approaching 30 of the 50 states now have addressed marijuana in some fashion or form. So some of the issues that I'm going to speak to, we had to address because we were an early adopter. You probably, I hope, are not going to have to address all these same issues. And if you do, there's either going to be case law or there's going to be legislation that you can draw upon to make sure that you guys are going to get it right the first time. We definitely hit some bumps along the way, and I'll touch on those. So what we decided to do today is just approach this from a top 10 things that you need to be aware of. So with that, these are the top 10. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to roll through these and speak to each one of them. And let's start with the first one. For those of you that know Mark Twain, you'll recognize as a Mark Twain quote. He talked about there are lies, damned lies, and then statistics. This is a critical first point to keep in mind when it comes to the marijuana debate. It's a very polarizing issue. I believe, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point in your legislative process, your bill was tied in the 50-50 split, and the lieutenant governor had to cast the deciding vote. The data that can be produced regarding this can be used either to make a case or for pro-legalization or anti-legalization. So the bottom line is, I'm just going to say right up front, don't trust the data. Too many agendas are packed within this data, even data coming out of reputable sources like the Colorado Department of Public Health or the hospitals or something. Everybody seems to have an agenda, and it's something that you just need to be aware of. So what I'm going to do today as I went through the next items here is really keep it to personal stories, actual stories that I was involved with, anecdotal stories. And I'm getting a bit of the sound choppiness, and I apologize for that, Chris. Again, that's my internet today. I don't know. I've tried everything I can to fix that. I'll just flag me if I need to repeat. Is the only thing I can say, because I've switched our connections. I've turned everything else off, and I'm still having troubles. So at this point, I don't know what else to do. So I apologize. Anyhow, what I was saying though is, as I go through these other 8 or 9 items, I'm going to keep it to anecdotal stories or actual experiences that I've had, so that we can avoid the polarization of data or using polarized data in our conversations. So the first thing that you really need to be focused on is, in fact, workforce. Through the years, the recreational marijuana has been legalized in Colorado for recreational purposes and even longer for medical uses. Employers are still confused. Manufacturers are still confused about what they can and can't do in the workplace relative to marijuana use. In some instances, we have manufacturers who really don't care. They've hands-off approach. They saw they would not make. However, there are others who are very worried relative to their workers' comp enforcement. You'll see item number 5, federal contracts. I'll talk about that. So the bottom line is, marijuana in the workforce is causing very complex problems. First of all, you probably already know this, but marijuana metabolizes different than other drugs or alcohol. So you could test somebody after a worker's, an injury on the job, and it may be a Tuesday, and they may have smoked marijuana on their weekend, which is perfectly legal, but it's going to show up in their blood test when they go testing for a workers' comp claim. We actually had one, again, citing case law. In 2017, a worker for one of the local ski areas was killed on the job. And so it was a workers' comp claim. His autopsy indicated that his THC levels in the blood were high enough that they declared that his accident was because of intoxication on the job. His wife insists that that wasn't the case, that it was just from the weekend, but there was no clear proof one way or the other. Subsequently, she was denied 50% of his benefits. This case is still working its way through court, but the case law that is building clearly is citing for the employer and not the employee. And it comes down to the fact that we just don't have good measurement tools to determine how long ago or if they're still truly under the influence to when that injury occurred. So that is a major concern in the workforce. So the bottom line, I mean, here's the two questions. Can employers allow, or do they have to allow medical use of marijuana or recreational use of marijuana by their employees? And the answer is simple, no. They can still enforce marijuana or just like alcohol or any other drug. Marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. Again, we have so for lawyers on the call, you could look up a case, 2015 Coates versus Dish Network, which is a case that actually was, that happened with a medical marijuana, not recreational. This individual had a prescription for using it, but was impacted on the job and again had THC levels that caused issues with workers' comp, filed suit, and the courts have sided with the employer, in this case, Dish Network. So we do have case law. Workforce is going to be one of the first issues that's going to hit everybody. It's not just manufacturing. I'll touch on a couple others as we go forward, but you need to stay in touch with your lawyers. If you're a manufacturer or business on this call, needless to say, recreational use of marijuana is a little bit of a lawyer's relief act, and they are definitely addressing challenges every day. There's something new that's coming up. So my best advice to you when it comes to workforce is stay in touch with the legal system. There's ample case law that's being developed, but don't be, try your best not to be one of those new case laws that come forward. The next one was the next topic, number two, three, warehouse and manufacturing space, was really a unintended consequences that we all first had to deal with. And it hit hard. And then came the statistics and the damn lies. And that is what happened to manufacturing because of warehouse space. If you were to ask the city, in fact, I still have an email from the city county of Denver from 3 years ago, you know, where we were trying to raise the manufacturers cannot get, no, that's just not true. The marijuana or the grow industry only occupies 3 to 4% of commercial space. Well, that's true. That's a true statement. However, if you look at the space that manufacturers use, Class C and D space, it turns out that the grow industry occupies 40 to 50%. And in fact, in 2017, when I last pursued this point, grow houses occupied 67.7% of Class C space inside the city and county of Denver, Colorado. This has caused a major problem for manufacturers, major problem for warehousing. One of our manufacturers is a supplier to Walmart, and those of you that might make or sell things to Walmart understand the requirements that Walmart puts upon the manufacturer for warehousing and storing inventory. This particular manufacturer nearly had to walk away from his Walmart contract because he could not find warehouse space to store the finished good because the grow houses had occupied it all. Now, the good news is, and this is again anecdotal if you want to say it or describe it that way. You could say it's good news, bad news. If you talk to people in the grow industry, they'll tell you that there is and this will be pun intended, weeding out because there are, I'm just going to use the term professional growers. Others will use the term cartel. I'm not going to point fingers one way or the other, but there's definitely some consolidating going on inside the grow industry in Colorado. Grow techniques have improved. It's no longer just the guy down the street that rented a warehouse and he's got some plants. It's definitely turning into rates. The lease rates, they're not coming down. So the growth space industry drove those lease rates up, and they're not coming back down. And I'm just going to pause because I just got the signal that said my internet was unstable again. Can you hear me okay, Christine?
We can. I mean, we missed the beginning portion of that story. I mean, I think everyone can get the gist of it, and if not, we'll clarify at the end. But
yeah, it was a manufacturer who was storing things for Walmart and nearly lost his Walmart contract. Okay.
Yep.
So, well, maybe what you missed, and this is important, is the city tried to deny that this was a problem by saying that grow space only occupied 3 to 4% of commercial space. Did you get that part?
We did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then you didn't miss anything important. So, okay, the next item on the list, air quality. This is one that nobody saw coming, and this is one where the data is still very much in play. To call this a nascent issue is a fair assessment. Everybody knows what a terpene is. If you've ever eaten an orange, you know that citrus smell. That's just plants have particular odors that they emit. Marijuana plants have a very strong terpene that is actually registered as a VOC, or a volatile organic compound. It's what provides the odor when you drive by a grow house. That's a bit annoying. There have definitely been neighborhood complaints because of that smell. But what we're coming to learn is that that the terpenes that come off the plants, when they mix with NOx, carbon emissions from our vehicles or anything that's got a combustion engine to it, it forms and the thing that happened in Denver is a section of I-70 and I-25, the business interstates in the state of Colorado. So they're immediately adjacent to the two biggest highways. Which part did you miss? You don't know. What I was getting to was, and I apologize again, I am so sorry this is happening. The VOCs from the terpenes of marijuana plants, when mixed with carbon dioxide or NOx, creates ozone. Colorado has been they've been listed as a moderate ozone non-attainment area for years. In 2019, the EPA moved us to a serious non-attainment under the Clean Air Act. There are many who claim it's because of the mixture of the terpenes and the VOCs of the terpenes with all of the air pollution coming off the vehicles, since they're all adjacent to the grow houses or adjacent to the highways, that's driven our ozone levels to the point of that we're having more non-attainment days than we've had in the past. There is no evidence to prove one way or the other at this point. All we know is that we no longer are a moderate non-attainment area. We're now a serious non-attainment area under the EPA Clean Air Act. A lot of finger pointing going on. Again, one side says one thing, the other side says the other. Something to be aware of is just the air quality issues. As the grow houses start emitting, nobody was regulating the emissions. You just didn't think about it. Who regulates the emissions of a greenhouse? Well, it's something that's now coming into play, and the people are starting to talk about here in Colorado. The fifth item, federal contracts. Again, I'll just use a story of one of our members. They're a large contracting firm. They build structures for all the regional transportation district light rail facilities. They do veterans. They built a couple of veterans hospitals here in Colorado. So they do federal contracts. The president of this company was telling me the story that he only interviews the top 3 candidates for a particular position. So he's interviewing a candidate who is applying for a senior engineering position. And so John's interviewing him. And in the interview, the candidate, when it gets to the point of the interview, when John says, "Any questions of me?" this young man actually leaned across the table and said, "Yes, I need to know, can I smoke marijuana on my breaks? Just like you might go out for a cigarette break." John closed the folder and said, "Sure, but not for my company." There is this perception that you can, again, use marijuana on the job in Colorado because it's legal. It's not, especially if you're doing federal contracts. If you're doing any work for the federal government, you need to be aware that the federal government is still illegal and that has ramifications upon your contracts. 2 stories to help make this point. CDOT, our Colorado Department of Transportation, you guys probably have the same thing, but they'll provide free advertising to a company if they'll clean up a segment of a highway stretch. And then there'll be a little sign that says the next 2 miles cleaned up by, ABC company. The grow industry wanted to quickly try to do some PR campaign for their sector. So they immediately applied to clean up different sections of the highways. CDOT had to reject their initial claims because they're federally funded. And they saw this as a potential issue because of the federal funding popping up Colorado, where certain grow houses are responsible for cleanup along the way. But that was a serious issue that had to be addressed, and one that your Department of Transportation may have to address, or at least your city might have to address. A final example hits very close to home. So CAMA's office is housed in the Metro State University's Advanced Manufacturing Sciences building. The way this building was built is the first 3 floors are either classroom space, lab space, or academic offices. The 4th floor that we're a part of is all open to private industry. It's the private sector. So we have a company who will remain nameless, but they manufacture components that are used by the military. One day they were entertaining a 4-star general who happened to go use the public restroom, the same public restroom that the students use, and it was filled with marijuana smoke. The general pointed out to this company that if one of their employees were just to use that restroom and inhaled enough that failed the drug test, they could lose the contract. That company has since moved manufacturing out of this building. So those are the type issues that you need to be thinking about when it comes to federal contracts. Item number 6, housing and homeless. Though this is one of the most controversial areas, and I'm just going to touch on it from personal stories, because for every study that you find that says homeless has gone up in Colorado because of marijuana, you're going to find another one that says it's gone down. So just a couple quick facts, and then this is stuff you need to keep in mind. 1, in 2012, when marijuana was approved and people started taking snapshots of what was going on in the homeless environment, Colorado was still reeling from the 2008 recession. I myself was volunteering in a homeless shelter at that time. We saw a lot of families. We were packed to the gills because of the economic same level. So you can make the case we didn't change. See, there we go. Hopefully you can hear me again. Can you hear me? Okay. So what I've witnessed from my own personal volunteering at homeless shelters, 2 of the biggest ones in Denver, is that the homeless became a little more sophisticated. So we clearly saw a change in who the homeless were, and they learned how to use the system to make sure they got a bed at night or they were getting the food. And this pushed some of the serious mental health cases that were in these shelters onto the street, or we have the statistics that prove back into prisons. So I'm not going to say it went up or went down, but I will tell you homeless and housing issues has changed. Something to be noted when it comes to housing is that area around the two highways that I said that had over 600 grow houses. They're actually, it's called Globeville. It is a residential neighborhood as well. Housing prices increased by 8 to 10% just in that region because of the presence of grow houses and marijuana shops. Well, that neighborhood has traditionally been a low income neighborhood, a lot of rental properties, a lot of rental owners cashed in, turned their properties upside down and built more warehouse space for grow houses, which then impacted low income housing in the Denver metro area in a very serious way, and a way that we frankly haven't come to deal with yet. A lot of it's been pushed into the suburbs, but even then the pricing for housing is so difficult. So just know that housing and homelessness is an issue. It's going to swing. You're going to see a lot of different statistics on it. Just be prepared. Statistics, damn statistics, and then outright lies. This is an area where that is clearly the case. You could hear people make the argument that traffic violations involving marijuana has gone down dramatically. Well, part of that goes back to the fact that marijuana metabolizes differently. You can't prove impairment like you can alcohol. So a lot of law enforcement officers have quit pursuing or checking. You could also find, I got a statistic that I dug up from CDOT says that our number of fatalities in Colorado in 2006 that were linked to marijuana was 6.9% of the total. And by 2015, that had gone up to 21%. There are a lot of arguments against that study that's saying it was faulty. The bottom line is if there was a fatality, you really can't, an autopsy, and this is also used in the ski areas case, an autopsy does not reveal the true level of impairment. All it does is show that you have THC in the system. It doesn't tell you how long that THC's been in the system. So traffic is an area that, the other thing is Colorado and Denver metro area has been exploding with growth. So we have a lot more cars on the road. So of course, accidents and fatalities are going to go up by sheer volume. To blame that on marijuana is just not necessarily an appropriate use. How am I doing on time? I got 3 more. I know you said I got some time. Are we good?
You're good. You're good.
All right. A critical point when it comes to traffic, though, relative to manufacturing is, again, it goes back to sort of the federal contracts. We cannot find enough commercial drivers to move product in Colorado. It's not just Colorado. According to the Trucking Association, there is a shortage presently of about 6 move freight that he does once a month from point A to point B. So it's a monthly shipment. The cost of that shipment tripled on him in 1 month's time because there's not enough drivers and you're paying a premium now to get things moved through. Well, yes, marijuana has an impact on that. To be a licensed driver, you have to pass a drug test. As more and more drivers are retiring, and we're trying to backfill that with younger drivers, we're encountering this issue. And it's a national issue because the driver may be based in Colorado, but they have to pass the federal laws. So that is clearly an issue that's impacting manufacturing, but I'm going to again throw the caveat in. There's a lot of reasons we're not getting new truck drivers. I mean, deregulation has certainly impacted the pay, the working conditions. They have, we now have Bluetooth tracking hours driving. which is forcing drivers to make sure they're stopping, which those stops cost them money. They're not getting paid for that. So there's a lot of reasons that are impacting the movement of freight and goods. Can't blame it all on marijuana. That's the bottom line, but it is an issue to keep your eyes on. Healthcare, another tricky one. I'm just going to narrow it to some areas that you need to focus on early on, learn from our mistakes. Very early in the recreational legalization of marijuana, we had 3 fatalities of minors who had consumed edibles. Colorado then led for the development of a labeling system. It's a diamond that has the letters THC in it to indicate that a product has THC or marijuana in it. You need to understand that edibles are usually 3 to 20 times higher concentrations. Probably they don't recognize or know what the diamond symbol means. So, I'm sorry, the 3 to 20 times higher concentration of THC is what you'll find in edibles. So they're far more potent, and as a result, they are far more deadly to minors. And when these THC products are being put into gummies or lollipops or cupcakes, even though they bear the symbol THC, the diamond with the THC, a minor, a young child is not going to see that. They're going to see a lollipop. They're going to see a cupcake. So edibles relative to minors is an issue that's going to have to be closely regulated. But it's interesting, here in Colorado, this past session, a member of the legislature brought forward a bill. She's actually a pediatrician. She brought forward yet another bill to be a little more stringent on edibles. And she's immediately shot down by her own party, even though they're the controlling party of the legislature. So it's an issue, but there's strong political clout to not try to regulate edibles any further than Colorado has. But that's an issue that if your policymakers are not looking at already, encourage them to look to Colorado's legislative history on edibles. It's clearly an issue, and it's something that has to be addressed. Another healthcare issue that no one's disputing is, and this is again, unexpected effect, is burns. The University of Colorado Burn Center has reported a substantial increase, basically a 30% uptick each year in severe burn cases. And by severe, that's 70% of a body surface area being burned. How's that happening? Well, a lot of the oils for higher concentration uses, and they're doing so with butane. The butane causes flash fires. There have been notable cases of people that have been doing this in a confined space, whether it's their garage, their kitchen, and the butane explodes, and it's caused major burns with the person that's been working on it. It's also, and I have a good friend who works for the fire department, and I've talked to him about the number of times they've had to respond to explosions in garages, warehouses, where they're actually trying to do this extraction with butane, where there are also plants being grown. And the terrapins, again, a VOC, reacting with the butane is leading to explosions, major explosions, taking out buildings, taking out homes. So again, I'm trying to hit on, when it comes to healthcare, you guys are going to hear lots of stuff. I'm trying to hit on a couple areas that we really are pushing the boundaries on learning new things. And when you talk to firemen, they're going to tell you that was one they were not expecting. But it comes down to do-it-yourselfers who are trying to take care of it themselves. To the bottom of that list, crime. Again, this is one, you could say up, I can say down, and I could back it up with 10 studies, as you could as well. So in this case, I actually went to my neighbor who is just retired from 25 years on the bench as a judge, asked him what he has seen since the legalization of marijuana. Now, to clarify, he's been a judge in a suburban city, not Denver metro area, but they all talk amongst themselves. You could say that crime has gone down because obviously we're no longer enforcing possession laws, even though there's limits still on possession. Back to the matter is the police departments are coming. Simultaneously, there's been a substantial increase in crime by juveniles. One of the things I could have talked about under healthcare is all sorts of studies that show that, and studies that contradict, that youth, because of the legalization of marijuana, even though you have to be 21 of age, it has allowed marijuana consumption to drop into even the middle schools at a much substantial rate than it was before. With that, then, these youth are needing to find means of financing their purchases. So we've seen a rise in serious crimes by juveniles, in particular the suburban regions, car thefts, breaking and entering, shoplifting. So there's definitely been, again, a shift in crime. I won't argue whether it's gone up or down against the total, but definitely a shift. It's definitely moved it to the suburbs. Again, my neighbor said that the last 7 years of his job on the bench, he was amazed to see how many youth he saw coming in for felonies. And it was generally something to do for something to be stolen that could be later fenced or sold off to raise cash. He readily acknowledged that he couldn't prove that it was because of legalized marijuana, but his suspicions were that that's really was the driving force. So I'm just, again, repeating what I'm learning from as I went out and talked to people. You guys are going to learn on your own, but definitely stay as a business association. Stay in touch with your law enforcement officials. Stay in touch with your judicial system, and follow what they're learning. And make sure you're protecting business like swords, the golden goose, it's tax revenue and banking. I'm going to pause because it says unstable and it has nothing to do with the internet. There we go. Oh, there we go. We missed the last few sentences. My advice was stay in touch with your law enforcement officials and your judicial officials. They're going to be the ones who are going to give you the clear evidence of what's happening on crime. Again, case studies are going to be used one way or the other. So develop those relationships that you know who to go to talk to. Watch for crime. They have crime maps. Watch and be careful how those start impacting businesses was the advice that I was suggesting.
Got it.
And finally, number 10, like I said, tax revenue. Of course, this is why everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, is they're saying this is a huge opportunity for revenue. I just looked up the numbers last week for 2020. Total marijuana sales, recreational and medical, surpassed $2 billion in Colorado last year. I know New York is already skyrocketing past that based on population. That generated $387 million in taxes and fees to state, local governments. That's a nice chunk of change, especially in a COVID environment. Since passage in 2000, or since the opening of the sales in 2014, Colorado has brought in $1.6 billion in taxes on nearly $9.8 billion in sales. So it's an appealing number. Just to give you a perspective, we collect a 2.9% sales tax on both recreational marijuana. I'm not sure what yours is going to be. I was talking to legislature to increase that. The marijuana industry grew, again, pun intended, grew underground. was an underground industry for a long time. If our legislators start getting greedy, I promise you this will just move back underground. So maintaining a balance on collecting taxes and getting greedy on the industry is something you got to be very careful of, because these guys know how to do it underground already. Again, there are many who maintain the cartels are already in Colorado, and they're actually growing and shipping this stuff south. So the reverse flow that we've seen for years. They know how to take it underground. If we push too high and try to finance too much off legalized marijuana, odds are they're just going to determine an arbitrary cap themselves and start moving it underground. There is already a price differential. Again, talking to law enforcement officials, they'll tell you there is a price differential between what you can buy in a retail establishment and what is being sold on the street. So obviously there's an opportunity there. They can flip that around if they wanted to and drive more underground sales if we get too greedy on the taxes. The final point is, and this is from personal experience, the company that I had before I started CAMA was a manufacturer of air handlers. We were a fresh air handler, which was critical to the grow industry. Again, getting back to the air pollutions. But we were very energy efficient. We could be solar powered. We were loved by the grow houses. In time, I quit selling to them though, because it was brought to my attention that while they may be paying with envelopes of cash, under federal law, I could be at risk for money laundering. Because again, at the federal level, there are many because of the fact that you can't bank this money. Now, the good news is one of Colorado State's representatives at Perlmutter has, since the original passage of marijuana in Colorado, has introduced the Safe Banking Act. It passed the House of Representatives this past April and is now before the Senate. I'm going to use this to wrap up. It passed on a 321 vote in favor with 101 vote opposed. It was not completely on party lines, but if you look at the Colorado, again, this was a Colorado-sponsored bill. All of the Colorado Democrats voted in favor of it. 2 of the Republicans opposed it. A 3rd Republican did not vote on it. So even though this act is supported by the National Bankers Association, because they need remedy as well, they too could be, the regulatory risk on them for handling money coming from a grow house is a significant risk to them. So they're very supportive of this. Yet despite that, we see party line votes, and which is why people are afraid that it won't pass in the Senate because of the 50-50 split in the Senate right now. So that really leads to my conclusion, which really is going to lead me right back to where I started, and that is lies, damn lies, and statistics. The bottom line is it's a very polarizing issue. As I said, I believe you guys had a 50-50 vote at one point in the legislature yourselves. And what we have seen with polarizing issues in the United States lately is that when something happens one way or the other, you have 50% cheering for the other side to fail. And the fact that you can find data that goes both ways on this issue clearly indicates that we're dealing with an issue where 50% of these people are trying to make sure the other side fails debate, or hoping that the boat captained by the other guy will sink. The problem is that those who are actively drilling holes in that boat have lost sight that they're in the same boat. And that's the problem we have right now. And the marijuana issue, the legalization of marijuana is just another example of how we have become so polarized. So the conclusion I would leave you with is it's now legal. Colorado saw a real spike in entrepreneurial activities when it was legalized, and not just in grow houses or retail shops. We had 2 or 3 companies that started up who were developing new breath analyzers, We're developing new technologies to measure THCs to get a more accurate reading. That technology is now spread nationwide. There's a great company out of Chicago right now that's actually leveraging off some Colorado companies. So the law's passed. I personally believe it will federally, it will soon be at the federal level, partially because of those tax revenues. I've never met a politician that isn't interested in new tax revenues.
Yeah.
So it's coming. So look for opportunities. That would be my concluding remarks. You can't change what's happened. So now try to find that silver lining and make some good of it.
Well, and make informed preparatory decisions, based on what you've presented today. Tim, we do have a question that's come in. How did Colorado license growers and retail sales? Virginia proposes to place grow licenses in rural localities and focused on disadvantaged individuals for retail sales licenses. Virginia also is proposing outdoor cultivation, probably, which will be impossible to secure. Can you talk a little bit about Colorado?
So initially, we started off with all grow houses were occurring in the Denver metro area. Houses would occur in the retail establishments. I have a map somewhere. I'd have to dig it up. But there was a map that showed the concentration in the early years after the passage of the law. It was pretty much all Metro Denver. Today, it's statewide, as more and more municipalities have come to realize there is a business development opportunity in this. So it is clearly gone statewide. But the way that was regulated, well, so first of all, I mean, grow houses are regulated by seed count. So we actually, there's a seed counting, and that's the regulatory method for determining who's growing what. Very loosely regulated because it's very difficult to count seeds, but that's the measurement. And the, in Colorado, growing outdoors, it too is not an option. It makes sense. I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to address the VOC issue, but it's not, it's not going to be a seasonal crop. It's going to be a 24/7. Oh, by the way, I didn't even touch on this issue, but if you're a utility company, I see Appalachian Power is one of your sponsors. If they're not on top of this issue, I could have spoke to this issue at length. The number of service changes or transformer upgrades that had to take place for grow houses because of the power they consume, the lighting, the light bulbs, and the heat that they use in these facilities is immense. So it was a great opportunity for our utility company as they had a lot of upgrades to make. But again, oftentimes they're being paid in cash, and that became a problem. So then he started getting some bootleg upgrades, and that led to its own health and safety issues. But the bottom line is we regulate by the state municipality. It started off being Denver municipal.
We heard bottom line. We heard bottom line, and then the rest of it.
Well, that's all I got. That's the bottom line. No, I'm sorry. The bottom line is it started off Metro Denver, but it is now definitely gone statewide, again, because people see the benefits of the tax revenue.
Okay. Please feel free to type questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, happy to call on you, unmute yourself. One question that I know some of our folks have brought up just in passing, Tim, is there's no question there's a workforce challenge, retention and recruitment of workers. Have you seen companies that are more, I'd say, loose with allowing usage? Are you seeing them being able to recruit and retain versus those that are unable to because of government contracting or the federal mandates or anything like that?
So workers' comp laws actually will favor companies that still enforce drug policies. Okay, so you're going to get a lower workers' comp rate if you're still doing that. So quite a few companies still are doing that. I would like to give you a clear-cut answer on that, but our worker shortage is so severe in Colorado. Again, I can't blame it solely on the marijuana issue. Certainly right now, Colorado is not one of the states that has turned back the extra unemployment dollars. So right now, we're clearly facing the fact that we're competing against the federal government's unemployment benefits. We know there are companies that have chosen to use a more liberal policy. We have one of our chair did that for a long time. We know of a large construction company in Colorado Springs that stopped. I'm going to pause because it says I'm unstable. Can you hear me?
We heard you saying anecdotal situations, but we didn't hear what those were.
Okay, so one of our chair people took that very liberal policy to retain employees, but once he got a federal contract, he then had to reverse his position. We have a large contractor, a construction company in Colorado Springs, has stopped recruiting in Colorado altogether because they just don't even want to deal with the issue. So they've actually shifted their recruitment to the surrounding states. So employee retention is a major issue. Marijuana feeds into it, but again, you cannot attribute or blame the marijuana issue as the source for the retention or recruitment. It's just one more factor we have to consider.
It's good. Other questions? Comments? Don't see any coming across. So this may be it with 7 minutes to spare, Tim. So thanks for your comprehensive overview of how this has impacted Colorado. I know I have several notes for our government affairs work and working with our legislators to make sure that we're anticipating what could be coming based on what you all have faced. Employers continue to let us know how we can help you as you navigate this complex issue. And I would just remind everyone, lynchburgregion.org for upcoming events and opportunities for you all to engage. If you have vaccination questions, we're continuing to see some questions on those. Please send those our way. We'll do our best to get you answers regarding vaccinations. And Tim and your colleague Darren, thank you all for being with us today and sharing a little bit about what you all have gone through to hopefully help us as we prepare for legalization. I can't thank you enough for being with us today. I'm sorry about your technological challenges, even in 2021, right? But I think we did get the gist of most everything. And if anything's unclear, that folks that are on this webinar today, if you have anything that's still in question, reach out to me and we'll get those questions to Tim and get them answered for you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And again, my apologies.
Okay.
I have no idea why today.
I blame it on marijuana, but I don't think that would be accurate. So,
well, we could probably find a couple studies that would say one thing or the other.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Everyone stay safe, stay well, and just know we're here for you. Anything we can do to help you, please continue to reach out. Happy to help. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.